Okay, hello. Welcome back to RESO Remix Day 2. We hope you enjoyed the morning mixers. And now we've got some fast-paced content sessions coming your way. And then that'll be followed up by some work group mashup meetings. And then we'll close the night with a fun reception. Or it'll be the afternoon for some of you West Coasties, but you can sneak away and have a little bit of fun, can't you? So right now we're talking about real estate data exposed, which is a little spicy maybe for what we're going to actually be talking about, which is identifier numbers for real estate organizations and otherwise. My name is Greg Sachs. I am the Director of Growth Management here at RESO, and I am joined by...
I'm Clint Skutchan with T3 Sixty, oversee our organized real estate division, which means I work with MLSs and associations around the country.
So, hey, Clint. Clint and I have known each other for quite some time. We both started off in organized real estate in the local association world. Me in Minneapolis, him in Fort Collins. And at that time, I think both of us understood that interoperability of systems was vastly important for keeping track of what our members were doing, what they're using, what designations they have. So that's where my interest came into understanding like who's in the real estate industry, what their purpose is, what they're even named. How about you, Clint?
For me, I mean, I came up, as you mentioned, in the association MLS space. And so, knowing that there are just different relationships between the associations and the MLSs, and then especially so as I've moved over into the consulting side, there are association MLS combined, associations that are served by regional MLSs. There's just any number of structures. And so as we really started trying to do our work, we do an annual report on the association and MLSs to try and bring that data set together. Initially was nearly impossible until we were able to connect up with the RESO, and ultimately I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the identification number today, but without that there's no seaming it all together, and so it's just been crucial.
Right. I mean, the goal here with the RESO identifier is to come up with a unique ID per organization, and just saying that has been difficult enough. Because of what you touched on, which is the fact that an organization can have multiple roles. And many organizations have the same name. The example I like to point to the most is the West Central Association of Realtors. There are 4 of those across the country in Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, and Missouri. So people get that mixed up. And if you're a national vendor trying to do business with all of those, it's even hard to figure out who you're sending credentials to. So we try to clean that business up. The other end of it is some organizations have 2 names. One of my examples there is Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors, which also goes by Southwest MLS. Are those 2 organizations, or are they the same organization that needs just one identifying number? Local associations are MLSs. State associations are MLSs, or they do services. How do you guys handle that part of it? Like, do you call the... Go ahead.
The state ones are hard, because they are so different in that you don't know whether they directly offer those services, indirectly offer those services. I mean, and it does get into what, I think you and I have fun debates about it. And I think the MLS industry has this question: how many MLSs are there? Well, are we talking about organizations and what constitutes an organization? Or are we talking about MLS systems? In that case, there are some organizations with multiple MLS systems for access. This is where, again, I think, having that ID number starts to become so important. Unless we can, for all these directional organizations, we can give them mascots or something like, you see in college. Outside of that, having the number is the only way to differentiate and start to understand that, there's an organization in this state versus an organization in that state. Those organizations do this organization does that. And for our purposes, trying to understand the industry and how things are fluxing between association MLS entities and associations as standalones and MLSs as regionals, that's crucial for us to be able to understand it. And so until we all adopt the mascot model, I guess we'll stick with the numerology model.
Right. It's interesting you say that because you track how many MLSs there are, and we track the same thing, but in a slightly different way. Both of us are trying to get at like what a brick and mortar company is, but we also have to at RESO manage data shares. There are organizations that might be managed by another entity, and yet they want their own certification because RESO's in the business of certifying data feeds. So really, seriously, tracking that stuff down can be quite difficult, at least on our end. But the reason why Clint and I work together is to try to ferret that stuff out. We're trying to, we go back and forth on some of these edge cases to just compare notes. And the more we do that, now we've been at work on our second year of doing this on kind of a quarterly schedule. It's making both of our lists cleaner, which makes the industry cleaner, if you ask me.
The accuracy is a real thing. The accuracy is a real thing, Greg. As you saw when you saw my notes when we first started working together, it's like there are all sorts of hand patched together notes and pulling things, and without someone to validate that against, again, and in that central number in order to be able to do it, it's really hard to know where the inaccuracies are and to identify those and pinpoint. At first, it was real easy when we first started doing this list and getting initial data from RESO 3-4 years ago. There were glaring instances of inaccuracies, and so that was really easy to kind of go through. It wasn't, it certainly wasn't very quick in terms of time frame, but it was easy in terms of identifying the glaring inaccuracies. But as we get further and further down and you're starting to distill the specifics about this organization versus that, and we do have consolidation movement in the industry, and then as you mentioned, data shares, those types of things, those are more finite. And so having someone that's tracking and seeing those and getting those reported, because there's no real central reporting repository for this. Even the NAR data is not always the most accurate, believe it or not. And so, being able to scan that against what we know is truth out there is important. So having you as an accountability partner and someone that's tracking and seeing things from a different perspective has, I think, led to more accurate outcomes, which is really, when we ask why does this really matter and why do we work together, is because we want to get more and more accurate. And I think we're getting there, but still have a long ways to go. And it's, through coordination and help of RESO and working with NAR and others that we're getting better with this.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, actually, that NAR has their own list, and they don't even follow their own brand rules when they list out the realtor associations. It's supposed to be all caps with a registered trademark at the end of it, and RESO does that because that's what NAR has told us to do, all of us in the real estate industry. And then, there's another interesting situation here where it's not just associations and MLSs that are one and the same, operating out of the same building. Maybe for legal reasons, they're separate. And, we're going to keep those things separate. But it's also like Zillow is both a technology company and now famously a brokerage. In the past, we might have two numbers for that, but now we're trying to get down to just one identifying number for that. And we'll touch on that in a moment. But I wanted to get to the fact that we work together pretty closely, at least on this project. I wanted to say it's not just us, though. RESO is an organization of volunteers, just like the data dictionary has evolved over time. Our certification methodology, the method of transport has evolved over time. It takes a lot of people to do this. And in addition to T3 Sixty doing this, I also wanted to touch on the fact that Showing Time has helped, RPR has helped, Homes.com. We give them a lot of attribution to those, but individuals will write in and give us information that helps us get these IDs shored up. So it's all welcome, and there's a place on the RESO website to continue to fine tune these identifiers. I wanted to get into organized real estate in general because that's part of your title. That's what your function at T3 Sixty. Do you see it shrinking and consolidating?
I mean, yeah, it is. Of course, the question is at what pace, I think many would ask. And now's the time, like for anyone watching, write it down. How many MLSs are there? And then, you can virtually share it with your neighbors or put it in the chat section, whatever it is. This is an industry that's predicated on accuracy and data, right? And we can't even answer the very basic question of how many MLSs are there. And so if we're really going to be thoughtful about, guiding the industry towards betterment and having consolidation conversations, or maybe, frankly, we're seeing a lot more competition happening out there where natural market areas are happening or service areas are being expanded. And now, what was once overlapping market disorder, just specifically because of market overlap, now there's a choice because consolidation hasn't happened as quickly as possible. And one of the big limiting factors whenever we or others who work in this arena go in to try and deal with MLS consolidation is that you have to speak association language first in many instances, because there's this fear of, well, without the MLS, the association dies. But thankfully, because of this process and the number that we have now where we can sew the MLS data together with the NAR association data, and we can create those direct linkages, we can start to see that now nearly 60% of associations are served by a regional MLS. So they're not a one-to-one scenario. And so this idea that you can't have an association living beyond the MLS, whether it be from a value proposition standpoint, a financial standpoint, whatever it is, we're seeing that a majority now of organizations are existing as a standalone association, which for me means the associations can get really focused and intentional on what their value proposition is and stop bifurcating staff time and attention and resources with MLS, which we know there's a natural inclination to want to serve MLS more so than the association, because the MLS is a utility that's there. It's every day. It's highly valued. And so, even if you're not intending to be out of balance in the time and resources from a staffing or a leadership standpoint, it just pulls you in and you head in that direction. So, but now knowing that and having this ability to have those types of conversations, Greg, I think it makes us more informed about what the realities are, and we can start to deal with specific data sets and numbers instead of, hyperbole and misinformation, which is usually just an excuse not to give consideration to what, needs to be considered in most instances.
Yeah, that's very well put. I like that a lot. It's interesting. You said 60% of associations are contained by regionals at this point.
Yeah, just shy of that. Just shy, but it's been increasing about 1% to 2% every year.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so at this point, we're talking about identifiers. I should define the product that we have at RESO that is spurring this conversation. It has long been called the organization. I'm going to screw it because I'm already trying not to use it.
That's why I was trying not to say it. I've just been saying the number this whole time because I'm still learning the lexicon, and I think you and I are embedded in it, right?
It was the OUID, the Organization Unique Identifier. And we are trying to call it the Unique Organization Identifier. Very simple flip of the letters there to make it UOI, because we also have a Universal Property Identifier, which is the UPI, or in Canada, they sometimes call it UPI. And then we have something we're working on called the Unique Licensee Identifier, which is something that we've been working on for over a year now in the research and development work group. And we're trying to get those under one umbrella as we move forward and get these really implemented into the industry. As part of that, there's going to be some data dictionary ramifications to that, because OUID as a acronym is part of the data dictionary. That's something we sort out later. That gets thrown into the work groups and discussed. But I have to talk about that because it is the name of the product. It makes for cleaner marketing. I come from a marketing and communications background, and so that helps, but it wasn't my decision. I just appreciate the decision because it should make this easier for others to use. Something as simple as a name can help out. The other end of this OUID to UOI transfer is we're actually attempting to change the product itself, which might freak some people out, but it shouldn't because we won't sunset the OUID number for any time soon. The goal of going down from two numbers to number, because a lot of people in the industry, veterans of the industry, are already confused by our two number set. Numbers have letters in front of them that represent the type of work that they do. So if you're an association, your number begins with an A. If you're an MLS, it begins with an M. If you do both functions, you have two numbers. We're trying to collapse that down to one simple number, not breaking any rules of your business. But if you happen to be an association with the same name as an MLS, that is your MLS, we would like to have one number with two functions that will still be sortable. If you want to check all the MLSs that exist in the US, you'll be able to check that. That won't disappear. It'll just be a functionality. So that's the kind of the fine print of what the OUID to UOI is. What's in the UOI? Right now, it's MLSs, local associations, state associations, technology vendors, commercial entities, brokers, and what we produce from that at RESO is the certification map. And soon we'll be producing greater reporting on those certifications, meaning we'll be able to identify how many lookups, how many resources, and how many fields are in use that an MLS has in their data feed, which is going to be kind of a game changer on our end because we'll be able to see how much of the data dictionary is actually being used. We've put so much time and effort into having interoperable data. We want that to be out there. And now flipping back over to Clint, I know that your real estate almanac relies on these ID numbers, but I also wanted to talk about specifically the technology vendors and brokers that you are working on at T3 Sixty that we hope to import more of into the ID product.
Yeah, just as we've seen, I think the value proposition of being able to sort and bring the data together with associations and MLSs and those relationships, I mean, that's just one part of organized real estate relationships or the real estate industry relationships, right? More and more, we're seeing the integration and confluence of broker, technology, association, MLS. I'm seeing it in my day-to-day consulting activities. I spend so much more time working directly with my brokerage and technology divisions over the last 6 months than we did, the previous 6. So that's picking up and it's moving quickly. And so, trying to get our mind around, tracking the brokers themselves, that's an interesting one. Anyone that's been in this space and has had to deal with, state level licenses and trying to see who's there and who's not and how many duplications they are, I've understood that struggle. And so, yeah, we've been doing a national scale initiative and, that's been more on the brokerage side of our company, and they're making great progress there. But as you can imagine, the duplication that we saw in our association MLS, databases is 10, 15x, and when you start getting into that side. But ultimately, just as you were talking about the universal property identifier and the idea of this universal objects identifier, the more ways in which we can interlink these things, the better able we're going to be able to tell the story and understand the changes and to help inform the decision makers that are in the industry based on, again, facts, not opinion or, blatant disregard for what the facts are to forward an agenda. So the more we have precise and accurate data, the better position we're going to be to not only tell a good story, but to make good decisions.
That's excellent. So with that, I think we've covered it. If you go into your Google and you search T3 Sixty or the Real Estate Standards Organization, you're going to find us. You're going to find these products we've talked about, the Real Estate Almanac on their side, the UOI on our side, including our certification map, and soon enough, fresh reporting on data dictionary uptake. And with that, thanks so much, Clint. And Those of you watching, enjoy the rest of your day.